Hello and welcome to this week's weekly revision tip looking at collaborative learning. Right, collaborative learning is one of those things that's been mentioned again and again and is a good way to get students really engaged in lessons. It's also a good way of getting around things and Ofsted like it. The first thing that you really need to ask yourself, and I found myself asking, was what actually is collaborative learning, right? I think what we need to come to realise is that collaborative learning almost needs to be more than just simple group work. It's got to be a way of looking at how students can strategically go and start to teach each other different topics and different sections within that particular topic. So, first thing to almost think about when thinking about doing lots of collaborative learning is how you're going to set the room up, right? So setting the classroom up is a major key point. There are a few simple things that you need to think about. Are the students that you're sitting together going to work well together? Are the students that you're sitting together going to be working at the same level or at a different level? You may wish to have mixed groups so that the more able students are helping the less able students, but at the same time you might also want to have differentiated groups so that you can really stretch the top end while helping to provide that extra support for the bottom end. You need to consider, are there going to be any more resources in the room that they need to be able to get at? If you're going to go and have resources dotted around the room, you don't want all of your resources all in one corner so that you get a great big group of students within one corner. So the setup of the room is really important, and it's something that you need to consider that you might ordinarily just simply forget about. Also, while talking about setting up the classroom, I would strongly advise letting students choose their own groups when doing collaborative learning, or else you end up with groups of students who you won't necessarily want together. So, the first tip that I use, or the first thing that I think about when carrying out collaborative learning, is how to get students to find out the information for themselves. Right? There's an entire plethora of different studies and different evidence that if students are going and find out information for themselves, they'll be more motivated and it will help them engage with the content. Right? There are a variety of different ways that you can do this depending on how much time you've got in the lesson or how much preparation that you've got. Right? One way to do it is to dot information around the classroom. Let students select which members of the group are going to go and collect which pieces of information. You may wish to get students to research something for homework the lesson before, so as a bit of flipped learning, and then come in and do some collaborative learning based on that. You may wish to go and get students to go and research separate parts, then come back as a group, then collaboratively teach each other that particular section that they've looked at. Right, the second thing that I think to think about are different ways that collaborative learning can take place. Lots of people presume that collaborative learning needs to be done in large groups. However, the first type and the most easy type of collaborative learning to look at might be paired collaborative learning. Right, so this is where you have two students both working on something different, and then they can go and simply swap over or swap the work and explain their own work to each other. Right, a nice simple way to do it is after they've gone and they've answered some sort of question or an exam question, is that they go, they swap work back over, they're given a mark scheme, for instance, they mark it using the mark scheme, and then they give advice or give advice back to each other on how that particular answer could be improved. Right, so by doing this, it's helping them understand where the marks are coming from, because they're having to explain it back to the partner. The next way to use collaborative learning is getting students to explain large concepts to each other. So, the way that I personally use this is after going and building a large concept model in the middle of the room, for instance, give students the chance to go and draw annotated diagrams or various things on what you've just explained. They can also do a bit more research or whatever around it, depending on your particular subject area. Then, give your students time to go and develop a short explanation explaining that particular concept or that key bit of information that you've gone and explained to them. Get them to either work in a group doing this or individually, then get them to go and explain that large concept back to each other. As they're doing this, or at the end, you can keep periodically stopping them, keep asking them questions to act as AFL, and by doing this, students explaining things will help them remember it, and it will help whoever they're working with, because they're going to keep having the same information almost repeated back on them, and they'll pick up on things that they might have necessarily missed. The next thing to think about, or the next way that you can use revision or collaborative learning in revision, is using revision hexagons. Right? This is a very, very short method where on your first hexagon you put a key piece of information, then around each side you get one student to go and write questions based on that key concept in the middle. Right? Other students will then bring their hexagons, and on one side of it they'll need to write the answer to the question that's being asked on the particular side of the hexagon that they're looking at, and at the same time they'll have their own concepts, and then they'll go and keep building up different questions on the other side. Right, so eventually students working in a group collaboratively will build up a huge amount of hexagons that are all interconnected, that will build up and help fill out any bits of content that they've missed, and it will really help them build up in confidence and asking and answering different questions. The next thing to think about are that students working collaboratively, so either individually, then swapping it over, or in pairs or in small groups, they can construct their own exam questions. By constructing their own exam questions, then that's helping them understand the mark scheme, and they're having to really think their way through where the marks are going to come from and how it can be marked. They will then go and give their exam question with, well, preferably without a mark scheme, to another group. That other group will go and answer it. They'll swap back over. They'll mark it using the mark scheme that they've come up with. Then they will give feedback to the people that have done it. Right, this way, so this type of collaborative learning is helping both the people who are constructing the question and the people that are answering the question to really understand the content, and at the same time help improve their own exam techniques. Right, the final tip that I'm going to go and talk about in collaborative learning is in answering exam questions. Right, the way that I like to do this is to get a big sheet of A2 paper and stick an exam question at the top of it. I will then go and put like a number of these around the room, get students to work in pairs to start answering the question. The first question, they will only be given 2 minutes to go and answer it. If they don't finish it, that's fine, right? After 2 minutes, move all the pairs around. The next pair will then be given 1 minute to go and read the information that the previous pair is written in response to the question. Then they will need to carry on answering the question. You'll carry on moving students around doing this until you've done it 3 or 4 times. At that point, get students to go back, read through all the answers, right? So read through all the parts of the answer and start to correct or add in any extra information that they think is crucial to answering that particular exam question. Do that another couple of times until the final group get their They'll flip over the paper, or you'll provide them with the mark scheme. They can go and mark that question, then give them a little bit of time to prepare something where they can feed back to the entire class on how the question was marked, what was answered well, what the rest of the class needs to improve on. Right, I hope that these few tips and a few bits and bobs on collaborative learning have been useful to you, and good luck with your own teaching. If you have any comments, please leave them in the section below, and remember to follow and etc. for more different teaching tips next week.